Your baby is taking in everything you do. And what most of us just don't realize is that some of the most common, totally loving things we do every single day are quietly shaping who our child is going to become. I'm not talking about abuse or anything obvious like that, but completely normal, everyday actions that can unintentionally mold their developing brain. Let's take a closer look together.
So, what if those everyday moments, the ones we barely even think twice about, what if they're actually sending a message that we never ever intended?
Because the science on this is actually really clear. These little interactions, they aren't just about emotions. They're developmental. They are literally building the architecture of your baby's brain, brick by brick.
Okay, but before we go any further, I want to make something super clear. This conversation is not about making anyone feel guilty. Not at all. It's about understanding. Because once you can see what's happening just beneath the surface, you can change it. And honestly, that changes everything.
So, to really wrap our heads around this, we first need to look at the science of it all. We have to understand the why behind a baby's reactions and what's really going on inside their brain during these critical little moments.
It all kind of starts with a hormone called cortisol. Now, when a baby cries and no one comes, their body gets flooded with it. A single time? Not a big deal. But when that happens over and over again, it can actually change the physical structure of the parts of the brain that handle emotional regulation and trust. The baby's nervous system basically learns a lesson. The world isn't a safe place.
And this quote, man, it just hits the nail on the head. As the neuropsychologist Dr. Alan Shore puts it, this back-and-forth communication, it isn't just about feeling close. It is the literal process of building a brain. When we respond, we're wiring for safety, and when we don't, we're wiring for stress.
All right, so let's start with situations where our best, most loving intentions can actually overwhelm our babies, just because we're missing their signals. Babies are constantly telling us what their boundaries are. They just don't use words. And what's so wild about this list is just how subtle these signals can be. Gaze aversion, just looking away. That's one of their main ways of saying, whoa, this is too much, I need a break. They're not being rude or shy, they are actively trying to regulate themselves.
So here's the thing we have to remember. Our world is built for grown-up nervous systems. The TV on in the background, music playing, a few people talking. For a tiny baby, this can feel like a sensory hurricane. And what's our first instinct? Often it's to add more stimulation, more jiggling, more talking, when what they are desperate for is less.
Okay, let's build on that a little bit and move into our next theme. This is all about the gap between what we say and what a baby actually feels and experiences.
Wow, this slide really paints a picture, doesn't it? On the left, you've got our words, full of good intentions. And on the right, the baby's reality. When we say, you're fine, you're okay, to a sobbing baby, we're creating this confusing gap between their powerful internal feeling and what the most important person in their world is telling them. And when we say, I'm here, but our voice is tight with stress, they don't hear the words, they feel the tension. And to a baby, tension means danger.
And this all points to a really critical concept, co-regulation. See, babies physically cannot calm themselves down. That part of their brain just isn't built yet. So they have to, quite literally, borrow our calm. Our regulated, steady nervous system becomes the tool that regulates theirs. It's not just a nice little extra, it's a biological necessity.
All right, so now let's explore those moments of disconnection. When a parent is right there in the room, but they're not really present for the baby.
So there's this famous experiment, right? And it reveals something just profound. When a parent's face suddenly goes blank and unresponsive, babies get really distressed really fast. Now think about this. When you're completely absorbed in your phone, what does your face do? It goes still. It goes blank. To your baby, you have neurologically become a still-faced parent, and it can trigger that very same stress response. And this same idea applies to something a lot of us do, sneaking out of a room to try and avoid crying. From the baby's point of view, the person who is their entire world, their anchor, has just vanished into thin air. This doesn't teach them to be independent. It teaches them anxiety. It teaches them that they have to be on high alert all the time because the people they love can disappear at any moment. And this brings us right back to the idea of ignoring cries. But now we can see it from a whole new angle. The lesson that gets wired into that tiny brain isn't about self-soothing. It's a deep, primal belief system that says, when I'm in distress, I am all alone. Help doesn't come. My needs don't matter. Okay, wow. So after all that, which I know can feel a little heavy, Let's shift gears. Let's talk about the absolutely incredible power you have to build your baby's brain in positive ways just by being present.
It's this beautiful little dance called serve and return. Your baby serves by making a sound or pointing at something, and you return the serve by responding. Oh, you see the shiny light. That simple back and forth is called the single most important interaction for development. That's not an exaggeration. It's what builds the neural pathways for language, emotion, everything.
And that presence can be as simple as touch. And touch, well, it's not a bonus for a baby. It is an absolute necessity. It's not just for when they're crying. Just that casual, incidental touch throughout the day. A hand on their back as you walk by, stroking their cheek, is a constant, gentle signal to their nervous system that says you're safe, you're seen, you're not alone.
And this all circles back to that idea of co-regulation. Truly, the greatest gift you can give your baby isn't another toy or a fancy class. It's your own regulated nervous system. When you pause and take a deep breath for yourself, when you find support so you can feel calm, you are fundamentally changing their emotional world, and they feel that shift in an instant.
This brings us to what I think is maybe the most important, most hopeful part of this whole conversation. It's not about being perfect, never. It's about what you do after you mess up.
You know, the research couldn't be clearer about this. Your baby does not need a perfect parent. They need a good enough parent. Someone who gets it wrong sometimes, who misses a cue, who gets frustrated, but then comes back, who reconnects, who repairs.
Let this one really, really sink in. The mistake is not the problem. The moments you get distracted or you feel overwhelmed are not what leave a scar. It is the repair that wires their brain for resilience and for secure love. That act of coming back and saying, I'm here now, I see you, that is the magic.
So, I'm going to leave you with this question to carry with you. It's not about replaying mistakes or feeling bad. It's about looking forward. In all the small, everyday moments ahead of you, what's one simple way you can return to connection? Because that right there is where the real magic of parenting happens.